I just spent 20 minutes doing a tutorial only to check the camera and it wasn't filming. You know, the fun part of, well, I won't say the fun part of doing fly tying videos, because most people probably check that part. You know, the important little details, like, is the camera on? Alright, well, we're gonna skip that fly and hopefully return to it one day. For the record, it was this beautiful honey hotspot perdigon, and I mean, it turned out sweet, except for the 7 minutes it took me to clear the eye with 2 different flies hooks. But that's enough about that. I am going to tie up the dark olive and pearl perdigon, and this is my #1 favorite perdigon. I've caught just, I'm not going to say like a bazillion fish. I don't know how many fish I've caught on it, but I've caught enough on it to where it is a 100% confidence fly. I'll fish it anywhere, any time of the year, any time of the day, sun, clouds, etc. And it just seems to work, as simple flies usually do. It's just a dark olive body, which I originally did because I'm a sucker for a dark silhouette. Since I don't use as much flash on my personal flies as a lot of people, I've always kind of gravitated towards darker colors because they allow the profile to stick out without adding any aspects of like flash and hot spots that will potentially turn off a fish. Now obviously this fly does have some flash, but it's minimal. And the only other thing I'll say is I fish this in the widest range of sizes and hook to bead proportions. Then I like, there's no other fly in my box that is in as many orientations as this pattern. I've literally got some tied on like size 18 dry fly hooks with a 3 to 3.5 mil bead that by the time they're tied, once the bead's taken up its space, like, it is a grossly missized fly, but it works. There's a time and a place for it. Then I've got them up to the size 16, 14 range. Like, there isn't a size that I don't have and haven't fished. I mean, I guess like a size 10. I haven't found a need for a size 8 perdigon yet, but maybe it's out there, and maybe I should tie one just to have on hand. Just one. Just a single size 8 perdigon. That's all I fish. That's all you need. Okay. I'm done with the accents. That's not what y'all are here to see or hear. That's not what y'all are here to hear. Alright, so I'm just going to start tying now that I've made a fool of myself. It's kind of a prerequisite for my videos or Instagram posts. You know, I gotta really lower the bar before I share the content, so the expectations are set. So I'm just gonna start. This is a misfitting bead, or whatever. This is a size 16 jig hook. Technically it's a size 18 fully mill 5125, but we're all gonna call it a size 16 for simplicity's sake, because that's what it is. It's just not labeled a 16. And it is a 3.5 millimeter tungsten bead, and the air quotes thread is Veevus body quill that I've got on a bobbin holder that is seriously loosened. Like, there is very little tension right now on the thread, and that's because this is, I mean, I don't use 18-aught, but I can imagine that it's about as fragile as 18-aught. Like, you can't put much pressure before you just start popping the little strands, and then you either break it totally or it starts fraying, and then you've got little junk protruding from the body that you've got to try and fail at covering up with resin. So I've taken the Veevus body quill down to the hook bend as you would tie in any tail, and before I bring the thread back up, I'm going to go ahead and lash in the pearl tinsel, and you can use whatever you have handy. I mean, the thinner the better. I typically, or I historically, use Sulky pearl tinsel, but that's not what I'm using right now. But it's similar enough to where I'm not even going to go into what I'm using, because it doesn't really matter. You just want thin, super thin pearl tinsel, or another color if that's your bag. So I've just worked my thread up to behind the bead. I've made a few additional wraps, so now I can just start winding it up the shank, and I'm just focused on making touching wraps down here at the butt. Once I get 2 to 3 wraps in, I will open this pearl up and just basically rush it to the top where I can tie it off. This has been a new process. In the past, I would just, once I tied it in, I would not progress my thread up. I would make the 2 finicky tinsel wraps and then tie it off with the thread, trim it. But A, it's finicky trying to do all of that at the bend of the hook, but B, if you did not trim the tinsel flush, you'd regularly be left with a little tag of tinsel that, again, like the body quill hair, body hair, it just becomes a pain to try to hide with resin, because you're not gonna hide it. So now that I've got the little flash butt, I am just gonna build a taper, obviously stopping the thread short of the tail just to leave some of that flash exposed. And I don't want a ton of taper, there's no need for that. So since this stuff is so fragile, I go ahead and do two turn whip finishes. And I do 2 because I've had so many either pop on the first finish, or if they survived the tension, they'll be sitting there loose and I won't know it, and then I'll go and coat it in resin, and all of a sudden I'll see this little snake emerge and start unraveling around the bead, and I start racing to find my hackle pliers to pull it tight, and so I go ahead and add 2 finishes so that if that happens, if one of those come undone, I don't have to worry about the entire fly unraveling. I've still got that safety net of the original whip finish. So it becomes a headache to trim away that portion that comes unraveled, but it's not the end of your fly as you know it. It's not a catastrophe. Seems so silly. This is such a petty little task I'm partaking in right now, to use the words like catastrophic. Okay. That didn't go where I wanted it to, so I'm gonna subtly segue away. So I am going to first focus on getting a thin coat of resin on the body. Trying not to work the resin up into the tail. It happens. It's not the end of the world. And if I wasn't talking and worried about the camera and all that, I would have been able to, with the same brush, go ahead and paint the resin on the top and bottom of the bead and go ahead and cure it and be left with a magnificent, perfectly tied, body hair-less perdigon. But since I've been talking and partially paying attention, I'm gonna have to do it in 2 steps. Thankfully, it's still hairless as far as I know. So I just added a dab of resin on both sides of the bead, and that's going to just fill the gaps, creating hopefully a nice round spherical bead cover. I don't know, it's not a wing case because I'm not putting a wing case on it, so you know, vocabulary, who needs it? So now I'm just going to clean the eye. I was going to pick up the perdigon, but I don't want you to see me use a good fly to do this. I want you to see me jab a trash fly through here. Whew, that went so much easier than the last fly that I didn't film. I tell you, I had to work on that one for a few minutes. So that's it. And with the cleaning out the eye, it's just one of those things I get in the habit of doing, because the second you start neglecting to check is the second that you start filling eyes. And then say you're tying for yourself, you get out there to tie on this fly, make the fly change, and you just start jabbing it with tippet, and you wonder why it's not going through, and then you realize, oops. And now you're out there with little, standing in the river, just trying to, like, it just becomes a headache. A headache that's avoidable by sacrificing an egg fly to just jab your hook eyes with. So that's this fly, and I'm pretty sure this was recording this time, which hopefully was a good thing. Hopefully this wasn't that bad that I regret pressing record. I don't think it'll be that bad.